And we are live for another Friday installment of David Green Real Estate. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Kyle Ranke. I am with the David Green team. I also run the Spartan League alongside with Mr. David Green himself, who's getting logged on as we speak. Do us a favor. Let us know where you are watching from tonight. Drop something in the chat. We'd love to see where you're hanging out tonight. Hope everybody had a great 4th of July weekend. And what's going on, David? Can you hear us okay from your end?
Sure can. How do I sound?
You sound lovely as usual. How was your 4th of July?
What did I do? Oh, went to my brother's house, hung out with my niece and nephew. It was a good time. I can't help but notice every time we do this that by comparison, your camera just looks better than mine. I really do need you to email me what lights you're using, and I need to get these. This has gone on long enough. I have to fix it.
Yeah, we got to do this. Next time I'm in the office, I'll take a look.
And I also noticed you're not drinking from your Spartan League coffee cup.
Well, I didn't make this drink. This drink was brought to me, so that's probably why.
Must be nice. Must be nice to have servants waiting on you hand and feet.
Hand and foot.
I say that as I'm the only one that has a full-time assistant that actually literally does do everything for me, and I must be nicing you.
Yes, absolutely. Let's see who we got checking in tonight. By the way, tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about Airbnbs, and are we going from a boom to a bust, right? There's a lot of talk around the real estate world about an Airbnb bust. All these people who bought Airbnbs, investors like yourself that bought something, and now we're seeing revenue drop on those properties. We're seeing way too much inventory. And so as a result, people are saying, hey, this could lead to a housing market crash. And so we're going to be jumping into some of the ins and outs of that tonight. We're going to be analyzing a couple videos along the way. But let's check in and see who's hanging out with us tonight before we do that. Looks like we got Jay. Came over from Instagram. Very cool. Thanks for coming over and hanging out.
There we go.
Ryan from Teague Valley, Oregon. Never heard of it, but sounds like a pretty forested place. We got Chris, our boy from the Spartan League and from Massachusetts. What's going on? Lisa, also another Spartan Leaguer, hanging out tonight from Southern California. Thanks for joining us. We got Tulare, Central California. Good to see you. Devin, he says, hey guys, good evening from my 1-year anniversary trip in Temecula. That's a cool place. It's kind of like winery vineyards out there, right? Let's see, we got Lydia from the Florida Keys, anchored in paradise. What is up? Another Florida person, Luis, thanks for hanging out. Listening from Annapolis, Maryland is Wendy. That's very cool. She got the little 4th of July flag there. I love that. Man, we got people all over the place. Let's see. John from Guam, Tia from North Georgia Mountains, Amy from Groveland, Ken from Tampa, Eric, Asheville. We got Riverside in the house. Marnie from Seattle. Amy said, did Sacto lose power? Sacramento, at least right now, we didn't lose power, and I wasn't here for 4th of July. So if you're referring to over 4th of July, I wasn't here then either. So not sure. Hideaway Homies, Panama City Beach, Florida. I heard there were some shark attacks out there, right? What's up, Angela from Pittsburgh? Good to see you. Seeing people from all over the world here. Out of curiosity, drop in. We got about 63 people watching live right now. Drop in the comments if you currently own a short-term rental or you're considering getting into short-term rentals, because maybe what we talk about tonight will be applying to you. So let us know if you own and where you own, because we're curious if that applies to you. David, kind of curious, what are your thoughts just on short-term rentals in general? We hear from a lot of people saying things like, oh, you got to get out of it. It's getting way too flooded. What are you seeing from your perspective?
I think real estate in general, we are heading into a overall market that's going to be more like it is overseas, I think, where America's been one of the only countries that you could buy real estate that would cash flow from the minute you bought it. And we all complain because you could only cash flow 15%, only cash flow 10% a year one. There wasn't other opportunities that people can buy cash flowing real estate almost at all, unless you're putting 50% down, right? We're the only country I know that you could get 3.5% down, 5% down. I mean, it's ridiculous how good it was for a long time. We just got spoiled and complained. And that may be going away for, who knows, for a while, where you don't buy cash flowing real estate. In most countries, you buy your house and it's more expensive than renting, but over time rents go up and your mortgage doesn't, and your home becomes more affordable every year. That is a normal model, right? We're one of the only places that think it should be cheaper to buy than rent, and it should be a low down payment, and we should get a great interest rate, and it should cash flow if we don't want it. We've just been spoiled with housing. Now, with short-term rentals, like what you're saying, what I think has happened is real estate has become more expensive and less affordable, very similar to how other countries' housing works. And so more and more investors have moved into the short-term rental space. And that has created too much supply for the same amount of demand that's been going on. And people have been arguing, not arguing, but they've been like fighting, would be a better way to put it, over the people that are going to be traveling to different areas. And so as new inventory comes on the market, it gets harder and harder and harder to be able to compete because you're fighting for the same number of people with more tenants. And at the same time, people that live in the neighborhood are pissed because they blame short-term rental owners for the reasons prices are going up. And they like the old school, I know who lives on my street. They just don't like the idea. It's different of people moving in and out of a house. I've never understood that because I'd have still never talked to my neighbors. And I've lived in my house for like 8 years. I don't know hardly any of them. I'm just like that. But the people that aren't that way don't like short-term rental operators. So you've got the market getting squeezed in so many areas everywhere. Then you've got people like this that are showing up to learn how to be real estate investors, which is great. But you have to understand that you're not moving into a space no one knows about. You're moving into a space that everyone knows about. And it's probably the safest place you could possibly put your money. So it's probably not going to be the safest, the best, and the cheapest all at the same time, which is why we're seeing real estate become more expensive and people are upset about it. But I don't think it's going away. At least not anytime soon. It will probably take a significant recession before we have any kind of an affordability reset.
Yeah, and we're going to be jumping into that a little bit tonight. We're going to be talking about, we're going to be reviewing some videos. We're going to be talking about financing, short-term rentals. We're going to be talking about supply and demand, new construction, how all of these, the labor market, how they can affect real estate, and then it can affect real estate prices. But more specifically, are they dictating a housing crash? And is anything going to happen anytime soon? And maybe even talk about some different markets out there. David, from your perspective and what you've been seeing, do you see like a lot of people losing revenue from the conversations you're having with, everyday investors on their properties, especially their short-term rentals? Are they having to pivot yet? Or is this a lot of this just kind of fluff and what we're hearing from data?
Well, I've heard operators saying that rents are down for sure, but the ones I've been hearing from bought several years ago, so they had a lot of buffer. It's not like they're losing money. They're just not making as much as they were. I've also probably more commonly been hearing that they're having to do things to upgrade, improve their property. And that costs money, which is why if you're one of those people that said, I want to buy real estate to quit my job and not work, and I've been screaming, stop talking that way, they're getting hurt because you used to make $6,000 a month, $8,000 a month, and you lived off that income. Well, now you got to put 40, 50 grand into the property to compete with the other people, and you don't have it because you've been living off of it. So you're kind of getting sucked into this now arms race where if you want to stay profitable in the short-term rental space, you got to keep reinvesting capital, which means you have to have money, which means if you quit your job, you put yourself in a position where you can't compete and you could actually start losing. So we'll see what the speakers on tonight's videos say, but my guess would be at a certain point, you will start to see short-term rental inventory start trickling back into the market for someone to buy as a regular primary residence owner. But there's so much demand for these houses, it's not going to make prices crash like people keep thinking. You're just going to see more normal people get a house. I'll answer a question you didn't ask me if you'd like.
Sure, please.
Not every market's the same. And I'm going to say something that a lot of you are going to be pissed off about. But if I just take myself objectively out of the space of real estate investing and I just look at the economy as a whole, we would probably be a lot better off if we stopped wholesaling. There's so much inventory that we never see that doesn't hit the MLS that you don't see on Zillow or realtor.com because someone buys it before you ever saw it at a really big discount. Most of the time, the person who owned the house that sold to the wholesaler did not know what their property was worth. They would have got more money if they listed on the open market. More of us would have been able to see that house. The person who just wants to buy a home would have had more options to pick from. Instead of every house getting 12 offers, maybe every house gets 4 offers and you actually have a decent shot. The market would be healthier if you didn't have these ulterior tunnels where people are snagging inventory that never hits the open market for everyone to see, because wholesalers are spending a whole bunch of money to market to unsuspecting homeowners and selling those properties to investors that are on a list or institutional buyers that are snagging them all up. That will tick off a lot of people because they make a buttload of money. If you guys knew how much some of the top wholesalers make, you'd be sick to your stomach. They don't want you to know. It's very, very popular. However, it hurts the industry, right? Like, if imagine cars being super expensive and the regular, your mom, your grandma, your aunt just wants to go buy a Corolla and it's $50,000. And then you find out that like Kelly Blue Book has put together a system of snagging cars that never make it to a used car lot. And they're able to buy them for $20,000 and wholesale them to somebody else for $30,000. But you don't know those people, so you have to pay a whole bunch of money for a car. You'd be pissed, especially if auto traders had to deal with regulations and laws and insurance and lawsuits and contracts and all of this oversight. But then there's a wild, wild west of the Craigslist auto game going on where people are snagging deals. We kind of have that right now with real estate.
Yeah, and I think it varies market by market, but I'm seeing a lot of states start to kind of ramp down or regulate on wholesaling because of the industry and how much people can be taken advantage of, especially in some of the more expansive markets that have really like exploded over the last couple of years. By the way, if you guys like what you're seeing tonight, if you're enjoying this, don't forget, hit the like button and also hit that subscribe button so that we can continue to build the subscribers here. But also you can be notified when we do these YouTube lives. They're generally every Friday from 5 p.m. Pacific to 7 p.m. Pacific. But make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can come back and check us out on a regular basis. So with that, what I'm going to be doing here is this is actually a live call-in show. That's why we jump on here and we do this live. David and I could just come in here and just pre-record this and get it out, but we actually want to talk to you guys live as well. So what we mean by that is if you send a text message to the number below, 833-777-0309, we want to have you come in and talk with us live on camera about short-term rentals. What are you seeing in your market? Are you seeing the fact that revenues are dropping, or that people are starting to put their houses on the market? Are you seeing more inventory pop in? Are you seeing a bust in your area? We want to be able to come in and talk about that and dialogue with you. Before we jump into tonight's topic, what I'm going to do here is going to give a little bit of a preface. So we're going to watch the first video by Reventure Consulting. And if you've seen him before, he tends to put out some kind of, clickbaity type thumbnail images, but has some pretty good points in this topic, a few of which I'm kind of curious to what David's response will be. David, is there anything you want to say before we start the first video here?
Kyle and I will be in Florida hosting a retreat in Fort Lauderdale. So you guys can still get tickets for that at davidgreen24.com/retreats. If you like this kind of talk, we also run a mastermind called Spartan League that is currently the most affordable mastermind that I'm aware of with any kind of quality. We're going to be charging more for that later and maybe rebranding it. But for now, it's still like $350 a month or something, really, really cheap for what you're going to get, which is 2 calls a week plus a whole bunch of other stuff. And I'm just going to say again, if you're here to learn about real estate investing, that's great. We're going to talk about it. I don't think you're going to make a whole lot of wealth solely investing in real estate. I'm a big fan of taking a 3-pillared approach. I have a book that's going to be coming out on this. I've been talking about it for a lot. Making money, saving money, investing. You really got to focus on all 3. So as we listen to today's information, I want you to look at it through the lens of, I have to do this. I have to be aware of this when it comes to investing, but I also need to learn how to make money, and I also need to learn how to save money.
Yes. And David, would you agree with this sentiment that the creation of 1,000 forests is in 1 acorn?
Wow. That's deep, Kyle.
That's Ralph Waldo Emerson. He actually said it on my tea bag, so I thought you'd like that.
That's very good.
So this video, just so you know, is about 18 minutes long. It's a pretty good video, but David, if you want me to cut it at any point, hit pause, just let me know and I'll do that.
Okay.
Airbnb liquidation is about to hit the US housing market, where we see hundreds and thousands of Airbnb owners be forced to sell their property, with the central issue for these Airbnb owners being something that's called Airbnb bust, the new trend where the revenue and profits for Airbnbs are collapsing, with the average Airbnb owner in America earning 21% less revenue this year compared to last year, with those declines reaching as high as 50% in certain cities. A situation that's going to cause a flood of inventory onto the housing market, because we're in a very interesting situation right now in America, where the number of rentals on Airbnb and Vrbo totals nearly 1 million, according to data from All the Room. That's 65% higher than the number of homes for sale, according to Realtor.com. Now, that graph probably looks discouraging to a lot of you home buyers out there to see that so many of the houses that you could have bought over the last couple of years ended up as an Airbnb. However, we're going to see the reverse of that trend occur into the future now that Airbnb bust is here and the revenues are going down. And ultimately, I think this situation could be as bad as the subprime crisis in 2008 for some of these cities, because people don't understand just how much shadow inventory is lurking in these housing markets from all the listings on Airbnb. I mean, let's just take a look at Phoenix, for example. In Phoenix, the Airbnb revenue per owner has absolutely collapsed from its levels in 2021 and 2022 down to only $1,700 per month. That's down 50% from where it was just a year ago. And what's scary about that is that the revenues in Phoenix are down 50%, while the supply of Airbnbs has nearly doubled in just the last 15 months. So you had all of these people in Phoenix and so many other cities in America over the last 2 years who said to themselves, hey, it would be fun to own an Airbnb. So they bought a property on Airbnb, or they decided to list their house on Airbnb instead of selling it. The result was that the yellow line, the Airbnb supply, went from around 9,000 in late 2021 to 18,000 today. At the same time, the blue line, the for sale inventory in Phoenix, has crashed back down to historically low levels. But now we're going to see the reverse occur. This Airbnb supply is going to crash down, causing this for sale inventory to go back up, especially because lots of these Airbnb owners used subprime loans to purchase their Airbnbs over the last couple of years. These Airbnb owners use something called DSCR loan to buy their properties in many cases. And what a DSCR loan is, it's the loan that they can get from a subprime lender where they don't need to provide proof of their personal income.
Go ahead and stop here, Kyle.
Need a good credit score to get a DSCR loan.
All right. Before he goes on, it is technically a subprime loan if it's DSCR, but we are all, in fact, I don't even know if it's subprime loan. It's non-QM. I don't know if it would qualify as subprime. We are conditioned to hear the word subprime and think, oh, bad, never should have got the loan. The people who get DSCR loans are usually pretty strong borrowers, and the property has to show that it's likely going to cash flow. So I would not expect to see a massive influx of foreclosures because of DSCR borrowers. It's not like what we're used to hearing when we think of subprime, which is like no income, no job, no nothing. They just lied. It's possible, but it's not plausible. It's not likely. The other thing is if inventory flooded the market in Phoenix and the listings doubled, your days on market would go up by like 3 days. It would barely have an impact. There's such a demand for housing right now that this would not cause a big difference in the market. The best way to understand this is that we tend to look at things from supply and demand are perfectly in equilibrium. And so if more property hits the market, increasing the supply, we're like, oh God, the demand hasn't caught up. So you're going to see a big price gap, but it's more like the demand's up here, the supply's down here. So if more houses hit, it goes like this. It's still really, really far from being even. So as you listen to this information, you can't assume and operate off of the assumption that we're at an equilibrium and any change to the house would get snatched up. Somebody else would buy it, either a primary residence homeowner or someone who's going to rent it out to traditional people. And we wouldn't see a very big difference in prices, which is what we're all here looking for.
the loan is based on the income levels from the property. So long as the income levels are good, there's no issue. But if the income goes down because revenues collapse by 50%, then you have a big problem. You can see this is actually something that Bloomberg wrote about 1 year ago. They wrote an article talking about how Americans are building vacation home empires with easy money loans. And this article talked about a woman named Brenna Carls based out of the Great Smoky Mountains who was making $100,000 a month by being a mortgage broker specializing in loans for vacation homes in Eastern Tennessee. And one of her clients was a 29-year-old former grocery store manager in Columbus who bought 4 rentals in the Smokies in East Tennessee. She borrowed over $1 million in these DSCR loans to purchase the properties, which have a typical monthly mortgage payment of $2,600 a month. Now, all that debt and those high mortgage payments to buy the vacation rentals wasn't a big deal a year ago because the revenues were still good. However, now in a place like East Tennessee, the revenues have absolutely crashed, especially in Sevierville, where the revenues are down 48% year over year. In Asheville in North Carolina, they're down 43% year over year. You can see that even in Nashville, the Airbnb revenues are down 39% year over year. And so this is a freight train that's coming for certain housing markets in America. This is no joke. And I'm going to show you guys later in this video the cities that are going to get hit hardest here, where the Airbnb bust is worst and where we're going to see the most forced selling and the biggest home price declines as a result. But first, I want to actually properly set your expectations about what to expect from this Airbnb bust, because it's not going to happen everywhere across America. And it's not going to happen everywhere across a given city. Because if we take a look at this heat map in Phoenix, which shows where the Airbnbs are, what do you notice is that the Airbnbs are very concentrated in specific areas of Maricopa County and Phoenix. You can see that they're heavily concentrated in downtown Phoenix, they're in Scottsdale, they're in Tempe, they're in Paradise Valley, and they're a little bit west towards Peoria and Glendale. Otherwise, if you zoom out, there isn't as huge a concentration in the outlying suburbs and rural areas. So one of the big things you got to understand is that in bigger cities, Airbnb bust is going to be a more urban phenomenon. Airbnbs tend to be located in more densely populated areas because that's where travelers want to stay. And so that's where we're going to see the most forced selling. We might also see a lot more rentals hit the market as well. Don't be surprised if those vacancy rates for multifamily apartments as well as single family homes continue to increase over the next year as Airbnb operators also flood the rental market with inventory. And what's crazy, folks, is at the same time that we're about to see Airbnb bust turn into a deluge of for sale and rental inventory onto the market, we're also seeing home builders in America begin to go crazy again. The May 2023 home building report from the US Census Bureau just came out, and it was a shocking result, with Reuters reporting that new US home construction surged by the most in 3 decades. Trend, which you can see on this graph, which tracks the housing starts for single family homes as well as apartments in America. And you see this huge bump in May. Boom, housing starts for single family shot back up to nearly 1 million. And then for apartments and multifamily, they shot up to 624,000, which is actually the highest level on record. And so very clearly the builders and the apartment developers are buying into this idea that somehow we're in recovery in the housing market and that the recession isn't going to be bad, or that maybe the recession is over. And they're saying, yeah, let's turn the building floodgates back on. But folks, when you look at the fundamental data, there isn't a recovery in the housing market. Mortgage applications to buy a house are still sitting at their lowest level in nearly 30 years. So folks, show me, where is the recovery here in the housing market that I see everyone talking about? It's certainly not on this graph of mortgage applications to buy a house. It's certainly not on this graph showing the vacancy rate for rentals in a city like Phoenix, which has now surged to its highest level on record, according to Apartment List. Where is the recovery? Oh, it's imagined, because the participants in the housing market are still conditioned by over 10 years of government bailouts and Fed stimulus and foreclosure moratoriums. They're conditioned by all of that to somehow expect that nothing bad can happen. And because of that, people are inventing narratives that things are turning around when they're very clearly not turning around. The only thing that's really in support of a bullish narrative on the housing market is low inventory. But as I showed you earlier in this video, One of the big reasons that inventory was low was because of all those Airbnbs, all that Airbnb and Vrbo supply hitting the market, which now is likely to go into reverse, pushing more inventory on the market. The other thing to think about here, folks, if you're a home buyer and investor, trying to understand where things are going in your city, understand also that the recession has not even really gotten going. We're in the early stages of the recession, but the unemployment rate is still 3.7%, very low. So, this downturn in Airbnb is happening still with a strong labor market. The inventory is low, still with a strong labor market. What happens when the labor market inevitably worsens? I think when that happens, folks, like people aren't going to be able to comprehend how much inventory gets released onto the US housing market in rapid succession. And it's going to be something that leaves just lots of people flabbergasted because they're just stuck looking at low inventory, not looking over here at the fact that all other manner of inventory for rent, on Airbnb, long-term, that's surging. And that's a signal of where the market is heading overall. But folks, I don't want to be too negative here. I actually think that this is going to be an opportunity for a lot of you guys out there. Whether you're a home buyer or an investor that's waited and who's been diligent, the Airbnb bust and the overall downturn in the market and the recession getting worse is going to create lots and lots of opportunity for a lot of you who have been waiting for a long time. And I think that opportunity is going to come most in the cities I'm about to show you on this list. These are metros that I've filtered that have the most exposure to Airbnb bust through a variety of different metrics. And I just want to explain very quickly how I came up with this list. Number one, I wanted to look at markets where the Airbnb supply has surged over the last 4 years, where there's been a 50% plus growth rate in Airbnb supply, because that indicates a lot of amateur Airbnb operators went into the market, and thus they could be the ones to sell first. Number two, these markets all have a high ratio of Airbnb supply to homes for sale on the market. And the higher this ratio is of Airbnb supply to homes for sale, the more chance that some of those Airbnbs make it onto the for sale housing market and push prices down. And of course, number three, these are all markets where the Airbnb revenues have absolutely collapsed over the last year, leading to lots of operators who are struggling and losing money and thus more likely to sell. And the first city on this list that I want to talk about is actually my hometown in upstate New York. We zoom in here on Hudson, New York. You can see that the Airbnb revenues, also on Vrbo and Booking.com, according to all the rooms, is down 37% year over year. And it's down by nearly 50% from its levels 2 years ago. And Hudson, it's this area, this kind of vacation area that a lot of New Yorkers went to during the pandemic in the Hudson Valley. Well, they pushed up the demand. They bought a lot of Airbnbs. So many Airbnbs that there's now around 900 short-term rentals on the market in Hudson and Columbia County compared to only 220 homes for sale. So there's 4 times as many Airbnbs as there are homes for sale. And another area that's getting hit hard by Airbnb bust is not too far away from upstate New York. It's actually New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. Particularly Portland, Maine, everyone, where the Airbnb revenues are down 33%. This is an area that looks scary now because there's 2,000 short-term rental listings in Cumberland County near Portland compared to only 350 homes.
How many people here have been busting at the seams to go visit Portland, Maine? Let me know in the comments if you've been planning a vacation to Portland, Maine for all of 2023 and you're just trying to find the perfect Airbnb to go. When you hear that, Kyle, are you like shocked that Portland, Maine short-term vacation rentals are struggling right now?
No, not at all. And I'm not even from the East Coast, but like, even if I was from the East Coast, it probably wouldn't be like the place that I absolutely have to go visit every year with my family.
I can't think of any reason that anyone would really want to visit Maine. I mean, I'm sure Portland's the nicest Maine has to offer, but like, what are the odds that people said there's a handful of properties there that AirDNA is showing do really well, and then prices are really cheap, which everyone loves, and so people flooded into this market with cheap homes and AirDNA numbers that look good, and no one stopped to think how many people are visiting here versus how well are the current couple of properties doing. And they created a really big boom that made no sense. That's not hard for me to see happening. And I also don't think it's shocking that you're not getting a whole lot of activity. That's very different than the Smoky Mountains that a lot of people visit, where your revenue could be down a little bit, or some of the other like popular places in Florida that people go to, like Orlando or Tampa. I bet you that they're not crushing it like they were, but they're probably getting some money versus something like Portland, Maine, where of course prices are going to be down a ton.
Yeah, and I'm also like, I'm curious what you think, right? I'm going to put the graph back up. He has a lot of these graphs where he talks about the current inventory number of houses for sale versus the amount of Airbnbs on the market. I don't think that those things are always correlated, right? He assumes that the inventory is low because there's more Airbnbs on the market, but not necessarily. And some of these tracks, you can see like a lot of these Airbnbs had a dip, but then they kind of got back up close to what they were before.
Mm.
So, what are your thoughts on, taking the amount of available inventory that's on the market for houses that are for sale versus the amount of Airbnbs that are out?
It's just, you're right. It's a stupid correlation because he says it. You go, oh, that must be important, but there's no logical reason to believe it. It also shoots him in the foot when he says we're going to have a freight train of inventory that's going to be flying in and prices are going to come down. Well, he's already showing you there's only 350 houses for sale in the whole area or whatever.
Mhm.
There's 2,000 Airbnbs. Okay. So if 25% of those Airbnbs came on the market and you had 500 houses hit, there's only 300, like inventory is super low. It probably brings inventory closer to a healthy level, not something that's going to make prices crash. So I don't know what the point is of saying there's X amount of Airbnbs versus listings that are available.
Yeah.
That doesn't really make sense to me. Maybe if he said there's this many Airbnbs versus people traveling to Portland, Maine, that would have been a useful metric. That's what you want to see, is how much demand is there for the supply. He's basically showing us the supply of two different things. It's like, here's how many diamonds are for sale, and here's how many cactuses are for sale. You can clearly see there's a discrepancy, but those two things have nothing to do with each other.
Right. Yeah. He's not taking into consideration short-term or midterm rentals, long-term rentals, like just basic people that are buying houses to live in them, or people that buy a house for their son. There's so many different ways that people can buy a house. And it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody that's buying a house is going to go use it for Airbnb.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's pretty much the gist of this video. So we actually won't share any more of it. We do actually have someone who wants to come in and share a little bit about his experience with short-term rentals right now in this current market, what it kind of came down to looking for the property, and then as well as going through a little bit of the renovation process. And so I'm going to bring Elon into the stream here. What is going on, Elon? How are you doing?
Hello, Kyle and David. How you guys both? Doing well on Friday.
Awesome, man. We are great, and we're glad that you're here to hang out with us. Just a reminder, if anybody else wants to come on live, just like Elon is, send a text message to the number below, 833-777-0309. So, Elon, tell us a little bit about where are you located at? Where do you live, and where is your short-term rental currently located?
Yes. So right now I'm actually in Seattle, about to go to a Dead & Company show tomorrow. But I live in San Francisco. Full time, and I ended up buying a short-term rental out near Mariposa. And if those who aren't really that familiar with the area, Mariposa is the biggest city near Yosemite, about an hour outside the gates. A little bit of the story of why I ended up doing it. I had one long-term rental in Texas near some family, and I was always very interested in short-term rentals. I think it's a little bit more of a lifestyle business as well. It's fun to decorate. It's fun to be able to go out and visit yourself. And I did it a little bit spontaneously, just because I definitely got a little bit of the FOMO that a lot of investors are getting. So I ended up buying in early February 2022, put a lot of my life savings into it. And it was a dump. I did not know what I was getting myself into. I thought it was better when I visited it for the first time. And ended up spending 9 months renovating it. I thought it was going to be about 3 months till I went live. I had very little experience, didn't really know what I was doing, learned a lot. And I think just throwing yourself in it is the best way. Spent a lot more money than I thought I was going to, and got it live in November. So it's been, what is that, like 7-8 months since it's been live.
Okay, cool. And how's the experience been since it's been live?
I have been absolutely shocked, to be honest, at how well it's doing. I was very, very cautious about this. And like, I understand the market forces that obviously occupancy is going down for a lot of guests. And that was kind of happening at the time when I bought my place. So I was very fearful of that. And I do understand like the risks that come with short-term rentals as well. And it's not as easy to sell when you're in a remote area, which is pretty concerning too.
Yeah.
But anyways, the way the way I found out about like what I was expecting was I called a lot of people in the area. I messaged people on Airbnb. I tried to get rough numbers from there, and that's how I got my estimations. And I was expecting probably like 60, 70% occupancy, but I have been absolutely 100% booked since I went live. I think I did a pretty good job in the design and marketing of it, but to be honest, it's doing a lot better than its peers. And I haven't really figured out the root cause why yet. But overall, I've been very, very impressed with how well it's doing.
Well, I would imagine a few things of why it's doing well and why it's continued to do well. Would you say that yours stands out from the competition in terms of the way it looks and the different things it has to offer?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's no question that it's becoming just table stakes at this point to be somewhat professional, right? Get professional photos, get professional design. Like I spent a lot of time doing that, and I picked a place that was very well suited for Airbnb with its view. And if you saw the place, it has this 270 wraparound deck that's it's very, very nice. And I spent a lot of time making it look really nice and getting the professional photos and make sure it had everything. But I do want to call it that, like, it is table stakes. All these other properties in the area do have all this. And I learned it from professionals. Like my property manager has 10 properties. My agent has 10 plus properties. Like some of them featured in magazines because they're so popular. So it was helpful working with professionals, but I do feel other competitors are doing that as well.
Okay, cool. Now, I want to go back to the renovation part really quick. So what were some of the mistakes that you made during the renovation process and what you learned from that?
Okay. This is the most basic mistake like anyone who renovates will ever find out day one, and you don't really get it until like it has to happen to you before you really get it. But do not go with the lowest bidder or the person who is fastest to bid. Go with whoever you think would be the most professional of contracting, because the cheapest contractor is actually the most expensive. Nothing. What's the saying? It's like the only thing cheaper or more expensive than an expensive contractor is a cheap contractor. And I have found that to be very true. I also regret paying in cash as well, because that might be trouble actually deducting that off my taxes for the legitimate costs I spent on this Airbnb.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one big mistake. Number two is, again, I was like naive at the time. I didn't really understand what like a general contractor was versus subcontractors. So I hired subcontractors. Like I had a person paint the walls who wasn't even a professional painter. I had, hired specific people to like install windows, and I was my own general contractor. And I know nothing about construction. Now I do, but at the time I knew nothing about construction. So I think what may save me money in the long term is if I went with the professional contractor who was able to handle all that and give me recommendations, because I did make a lot of mistakes along the way. I did actually spend extra costs doing so. And I know general contractors have an additional premium to them because they are doing all that work. For my first project, I think it would have been worth it. As an experienced investor, I don't think that's how you make money in the long term. I think you have to know what you're doing, but for me, it would have been helpful.
And are you managing the property yourself, or do you have a property manager?
No, I have a property manager. I actually met them originally when I was going on Airbnb, messaging people, trying to figure out what the market was like and how much. And they reached out. I talked to them, and they also run a property management company where they own about 10, they manage about 10, and they take about 20% of revenue and handle the cleaning, which I think is a pretty fair bet or fair deal.
Awesome. So based on everything that we've talked about tonight so far, what's kind of your takeaway about short-term rentals in general? It sounds like you're in a pretty good area with high demand, so it's not affecting you as much as, say, like Phoenix, where we're seeing 50% revenue drops.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned because like I do see it in the numbers of my peers, right? So I go and I look at like, people I know in the area that own Airbnbs as well, and I look at their numbers, and I do see them like pretty occupied, more so than in the past. And I've talked to my property manager about numbers. So there is a decrease. I'm not like tuning my own home, but there is something weird about my property where it is fully booked, and I haven't figured out the pinpoint because it doesn't look that much better than all the other ones. So it's kind of a unique case. But all that being said, I am nervous about buying in the future because I understand the market forces. I understand there's like so unlimited supply to this, or so much more supply that can be added, but really limited demand that can be added as well. And I think that also, like, for example, even this show, we're talking about short-term rental. You go to bigger pockets, like, 20% of episodes mention short-term rentals, where if you look a year ago, it's like 5%. You know, it's a thing that people are talking about a lot. Even David yourself, like you've mentioned in previous podcasts that like, you know, years ago that you weren't going to get into short-term rentals. And now you recently bought one as well, which makes sense because it is a new rental market, but like everyone's getting into it now.
I bought a whole bunch of them, man. I bought like 20.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I there's this episode I remember like years ago where you're like, yeah, it's a very risky investment, and it is still. But that just shows me that like there's just so much supply and everyone's talking about it. Like professional,
it's your only option. There's no other way to get into the best neighborhoods, the best areas, the best locations without doing short-term rental. There's nothing else to buy. So the question isn't, is it riskier than traditional? Because it is. The question becomes, is it riskier than buying nothing?
Yeah,
because now it's like it's kind of your only option.
I mean, one of the things I want to do in my lifestyle is like live that type of lifestyle where you can jump around cities. I work remotely, so like I want to live the type of lifestyle where you can jump around cities and Airbnb my own place out and then come back and live in it when I want to. And that's like an awesome benefit of Airbnb. So it is really a lifestyle business. But to go back to my main point, I see there being more demand in the future. I think that Airbnb still has a lot of room to grow in terms of how many people are going to be staying in them, but supply is going to grow at so much more of a rapid rate. And I see a little bit more loose and careless money going into it. So in order to just like diversify myself, my next few properties are going to be long-term rentals, and I'll see where the market's at in a few years.
Well, let us know at the One Brokerage if we can get you pre-approved, and we'll point you in the direction where we see some of our other clients buying, because it's getting harder and harder to find cash flowing areas, but there's still a couple out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. My other property I have right now is in a city right outside Texas called Rosenberg, because I have family there, and it's actually that's where I'm going to be actually expanding my footprint a little more.
Okay.
Cool. Awesome, Elon. Well, appreciate you coming on to the show and sharing your 2 cents, and as well as your experience in this market. And we wish you the best. And yeah, make sure you go check out the One Brokerage for some of the loans on your new properties. And if you ever want to come to a retreat or something like that, go check that out as well. We'd love to have you there.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Kyle and David.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Thanks, man.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to go to the next video. This one's a little bit more tempered down, a little bit less clickbaity, a little bit more, I would say, just reasonable and rational in a sense. It's going to be less focused on data and statistics and a little bit more just on overall investment basics. So this will be a good video. I'm going to pull it on here, and we will get it going. Give me 1 second here. I did the wrong button. Shoot. There we go.
Will trigger a housing market crash. So I want to give you the facts because there is a lot of misinformation out there. I'm going to lay out the situation for you, and then you can tell me what you think, and I'll tell you what I think. So we're all familiar with Airbnb. So I'm sure that a lot of people here have used Airbnb, or they're at least familiar with the concept. So there are rumors that people hosting on Airbnb are seeing the revenues drop by 50% because of oversupply and falling demand. And some people are predicting that as a result, Airbnb property owners will be forced to sell their properties because they're losing so much money. This will add to housing inventory, and this will trigger a housing market crash, and home prices in general are going to plummet. But let me tell you what Airbnb is saying. So they responded. Airbnb says that this is false, that this is not happening. Airbnb spokesperson Sam Randall said, and I quote, "The data is not consistent with our own data." Randall proceeded to say, "As we said during our first quarter earnings, more guests are traveling on Airbnb than ever before. Nights and experiences booked grew 19% in the first quarter of 2023 compared to a year ago." So that's the official response from Airbnb. But of course, that's Airbnb. And of course, they're going to come out with a positive statement. So let's look at a third party. AirDNA is a data provider, and they've been collecting data on short-term rental listings since 2014. So they scrape data. Their data shows that revenue per listing has fallen by 3% year over year. Okay, so a few things I want to say about this. Revenue per listing fell by 3% year over year, But you have to remember that 2022 was a record year. It was a tough comp. Additionally, this is the average. So I know that some people are going to flood the comments. They're going to say that revenues are down massively in Phoenix, or take a look at Austin. So yes, of course there are going to be some outliers. However, there are US cities where Airbnb revenues are up massively. Okay, but revenue per listing is still down by 3%. So that's bad. That's not awful, but that's still bad. Negative is negative, right? So a very good question, a very important question is, how's the outlook? Chief economist of AirDNA, Jamie Lane, predicts that revenue per available room will decline 1 to 2% in the second half of this year. Lane is predicting less occupancy, but slightly higher rates. In 2024, Lane predicts growth to be flat. So this is consistent with what Airbnb is saying. So nobody is denying the revenue per listing is going to be down. It's just a matter of how bad will the situation get. And the expectation is that revenue per listing will go down, but it's not going to crash. So the question is, will this put enough pressure on Airbnb property owners to sell their properties in a fire sale and trigger a housing market crash? So let's take a look at the facts and circumstances. So I want to give you the hard numbers. There are approximately 144 million housing units here in the US. There are 1.2 million short-term rentals here in the US. So we're talking about Airbnb, Vrbo, etc. That is less than 1% of the US housing stock. It's 0.8%. So even if the situation got extremely bad, obviously not 100% of these property owners are going to sell their properties. So you have to take a fraction of that fraction, and it is a rounding error compared to the overall US housing stock. Okay, so let's say that you have a property that you list on Airbnb. Revenue per listing is falling, then what do? You have 4 options. So option number 1 is to weather the storm and ride it out. Option number 2 is to convert it into a longer term rental, so you can lease out your property for a 1-year term. Option number 3, you can find a way to improve your listing. And number 4, you sell your property. So I'm telling you, not all Airbnb property owners are going to freak out and go with option number 4. Not everybody is going to sell their properties. So I'll tell you this, I understand completely that hosting on Airbnb is becoming more competitive. More people are entering the game and there's more inventory. However, demand for short-term rentals is increasing as well. But it's true that currently supply growth on Airbnb is outpacing demand growth. But those are the facts. 3% revenue decline per listing, that is the average. Again, I do not deny that a certain city may be impacted more than others. But the numbers do not support the theory of an Airbnb scenario triggering a nationwide housing market crash. So if you're rooting for a housing market crash, then you need the situation to be like it was back in 2010. In 2010, there were 2.9 million foreclosures. Those homes, 2.9 million homes, they got dumped onto the open market. And that is a lot of homes in comparison, because you have to remember that each year, about 6 million homes are sold. So if you flood the market with 2.9 million foreclosures, yes, it's going to take something like that to trigger a housing market crash. So you need something big like that to happen. Okay, so I'm not going to deny that foreclosures are going up. They're up this year compared to last year. They're up by 14%. However, still about 130,000 foreclosures are expected this year. But take a look at the numbers, 130,000 compared to 2.9 million. So short-term rental market, 1.2 million housing units, that's in the US. If all of those sell, that's still shy of 2.9 million. So if we want to get a housing market crash, we're going to need to see, well, this is my opinion, we're going to have to see more economic damage. It's not going to, the short-term rentals, that's not going to be what causes a housing market crash. Therefore, I believe that we need a severe recession to trigger a housing market crash. It'll take something like that to get the job done, not problems with the Airbnb business. So the market, if you take a look at the numbers, it's just simply not big enough. Another wild card that I want to throw into this discussion is regulation, because I know a lot of people are going to mention this. So cities around the US, they're trying to fight with Airbnb. To date, there are approximately 30 major cities that are trying to increase regulation or taxes for short-term rentals. And of course, this discourages people to host on Airbnb. So New York City is a good example. In 2022, New York City passed a law that required proper permitting to be a host on Airbnb. Enforcement was supposed to begin in July of this year. In response, Airbnb sued New York City with 2 lawsuits in Manhattan. Airbnb said that the regulatory requirements would practically be a ban on short-term rentals. That's because you would have to jump through so many regulatory hurdles. So far, approximately 20 people in NYC have been approved of the necessary permits and licensing to host in New York City. So currently, New York City does not intend to issue fines until after September 5th. So the deadline has been pushed back a little bit further. But I'm not going to discount this threat because it could be big. Litigation may spread to more cities across the US that are looking to increase regulation on short-term rentals. In other cities, they might look to discourage Airbnb hosts with higher taxes. So depending on how this concludes, it may persuade more Airbnb property owners to sell their properties. However, I want you to keep this in mind because I'm just looking at this practically. The same regulatory issues have been attempted on ride-sharing companies. So I'm talking about Uber and Lyft, and we all know how this worked out from a regulatory standpoint. Additionally, a portion of listings on Airbnb are owner-occupied. So what I mean by this is that some people hosting on Airbnb, they're not renting out their entire home, or the property may be someone's vacation home. Okay, so what do I mean by this? Where am I going with this? So what I want to say is that for a portion of Airbnb listings, the property owners are not wholly dependent on the Airbnb income to sustain their property. So sure, it may cut off a supplementary source of income and it would be a burden, but it may be an exaggeration to say that it will force all Airbnb property owners to dump their properties. And again, the market size of Airbnbs is just not big enough to trigger a housing market crash. There are 40,000 Airbnb listings in New York City. There are 3.5 million housing units in New York City. If all 40,000 New York City Airbnb property owners were forced to sell their properties, and of course, you know that wouldn't be the case, that would be an inventory increase of 1%. And that's just not enough to move the needle. So if you want home prices to crash, listen, I don't blame you. Home prices, homes, they're just more unaffordable than ever. Home prices have shot up in the past few years. Interest rates are around 7%. It makes it difficult to buy a home and to pay the mortgage. So I understand. If you really want to blame someone, if you really want to vent, there are bigger culprits out there than Airbnb. You can blame the big corporations for buying up so many properties. You can blame the Federal Reserve for printing trillions of dollars and causing inflation. This drives up the cost of materials and labor to build new homes. You can blame the Federal Reserve for raising interest rates. I believe that the true solution for affordable housing is to build more homes. The truth is that we are in a systemic housing shortage. They're saying that it's supposed to last for the rest of the decade. So supposedly it's supposed to improve little by little each year, but it's not going to get fixed overnight. So let me know what you think. Please leave your comments down below. I look forward to reading them. Please.
So that's a lot different from the first video that we watched. I like your comment. How many of you feel grateful to get to listen to me speak after hearing this guy talk? He puts out good information, but there you can tell there's no editing or anything involved.
Yeah, and he has what? You said he has how many subscribers?
I think he has like almost 2 million, like 1.81.
This indiscretion cannot stand. Every one of you right now need to like this video and subscribe to my channel, because if that guy has 2 million subscribers, I'm not wearing a tie, but I'll put a tie on if that's going to make you guys all subscribe to my channel. I do not understand how on earth stumbling through that data, literally reading off of a paper in a shirt tucked in led to 2 million subscribers. That was rough, but he did make good points, right? I feel like the first guy was all flavor and the second guy was all nutrition, but there wasn't a whole lot of mixing going on there. What did you think about his points, Kyle?
I actually liked his points. He's basically saying, hey, listen, the Airbnb thing is just a blip. If every single Airbnb house went underneath and basically flopped and, you know, went back on the market or whatever, we would not have this flood of inventory. If anything, it's like what you said, David, it would be like a blip on the map. We wouldn't even notice that it happened. So I agree. He had some really good points. There's other contributing factors that would need to happen for a crash to happen. And I like it because he didn't create it in a clickbaity way. So I thought it was a pretty good video overall. What were your thoughts?
I love that he mentioned that a lot of the Airbnb inventory is not a pure vacation rental. It is a house someone lives in that they also Airbnb. That's how these numbers can be misleading. When someone just throws a graph on a screen and it's got numbers moving around, you go, oh, you get all scared, and then you break the numbers down and you're like, well, if a big percentage of short-term rentals are how someone lives in their house and they just throw it on Airbnb when they're out of town, or they have an ADU in the back, that's definitely not a thing that we have to worry about the market being flooded with inventory. I can't help but noticing how much of the content that creators are putting on YouTube is far one side, like the sky is falling, the market's going to crash, it's going to be a recession like we've never seen. I mean, God, I've heard Robert Kiyosaki say this over and over and over. I've heard I can't remember the guy's name right now, but he was the guy that was in The Big Short, Michael something, saying sell all of your stocks. The crash that's bigger than any crash is going to be coming. They keep saying this over and over and over. Or you go on the other side and they're saying real estate investing is easy. I'm going to show you how to make $20,000 a month buying a short-term rental and quit your job. And then all these people go pay for these courses, and then they jump in and they buy in Portland, Maine, and they go, hey, they have good lobster rolls. Yeah, they do, but they don't have much else. No one's flying out there. It's really hard to get information that's right down the middle that just says, what's the actual truth? What are the real numbers, not the sensationalized way that it's being given. Thank you. Angela says that's why I only get my information from David and Kyle. The problem is this is boring. Nobody wants to subscribe or follow to hear the truth, right? They want to hear a version of it that would make them feel smart. And he kept saying, like, if we want this to happen, if we want the market to crash, we're going to need to have a big recession. It almost seemed like he was rooting for it. Everybody, let me just give you some insight here. Housing crashing, the market crashing, is not going to lead to great bargains that you can go in there and buy. In order for the market to crash, nobody has to want to own real estate. Okay. It's not like we're going to have a bunch of Airbnb people put their house on the market and prices are going to go super low and you're going to scoop it and buy it and you're going to rent it out to someone on Airbnb. In order for the prices to crash, you have to have way more supply than demand. What is demand? Well, it could be short-term rental people that are moving to use your unit. It could be regular tenants that just want a place to live. If prices crash, it probably means that there is no one to rent your house because some investor or some big institutional investor would have bought it before it became down to $50,000 like we keep thinking. When you have a crash, it usually means you can buy the house, but there's nothing to do with it. I want everyone to remember that. If you're like, I'm holding my breath, waiting for the crash to come. First off, that's not a great strategy because it might be 20 years down the line and houses are selling for $4 million and they crash to $2 million, but you can buy it now for $400,000. Okay. That's one thing to think about. The other is, in order to crash, you have to buy an asset that nobody wants, which means there is no demand, which means you have nothing to do with it, but live in it. Right. So unless you're planning on, like, I don't know, running a daycare out of a house or something like that, you have some extra cool strategy that no one's thinking about. Waiting for a crash is a bad strategy to get into investing.
I have two questions for you on that. Number one, do you think that people want the housing market to crash, or they say they want the housing market to crash so that because they have that short-term memory of the last crash back in 2008 and everybody was able to get a bunch of houses and they're retrospectively looking back, wish they would have got that house for $400,000 cheaper than what it's going for now?
That's what I think. Exactly. I think they remember the last time we had a housing crash, we still had tenants. People still needed a place to rent. But what you don't remember is that you couldn't get a loan because you got laid off.
Mhm.
During the last housing crash, it was a full-on economic recession. People's 401ks had plummeted. People were losing their jobs. People were getting laid off. Tenants needed a place to live, but they didn't necessarily have a job. Like, it was really complicated. You had to know how to screen a tenant because a lot of these people that lost their home also lost their jobs. So now they want to rent from you, but how do they have money to pay for that? There was a lot of lying going on. Like, if you'd put a tenant in your house, you'd have to evict right away. And they're like, shoot, I can drag this thing out for 4 months because the courts were really backed up. And so they were just bouncing from house to house, staying for free before someone would evict them. And they didn't care because they lost their house. So now they're pissed at you that you still have one. People assume that low prices is going to be great deals, but that isn't how it works. The only way, guys, the only way we will have houses become more affordable is if we increase supply and demand stays the same. We want demand to stay the same or even get better, but we want to increase supply. If that happens, yes, housing will become more affordable, but rents will stop going up. Because if you charge too much for rent and there's a whole bunch of supply, your tenant will just go buy a house. And if they can't go buy a house, then they're going to go rent from someone else that's not charging more than you. If we have a whole, like, well, this is what you see happening with Airbnb. That's a great example because so many people are getting in the space. The average daily rate that someone can charge who's an operator has to come down because you're competing with everyone else. When the market is flooded with supply, it's easier to get in, but it's hard to make money. If we have a ton of housing inventory that we build and we increase supply, this crazy appreciation that we've seen over the last 6 years goes away. Appreciation might just stall. Yeah, housing's affordable. Everyone has an affordable place to live, and you pay 500 grand for that house, it stays worth 500 grand. Maybe it goes up to 505. So I am not saying that would be bad. That would be bad for some people. It'd be good for other people. The way it is right now is bad for some people. It's good for other people. There aren't good markets and bad markets. There are markets that favor certain people over others. And paying attention to the law, paying attention to economics, paying attention to supply and demand, paying attention to what's happening just tells you what demographic to work in or what strategy to use. I just want everyone here to know if housing prices crashed, it's not like, oh, free money. We can go get in really easy. There's no one to rent to. You're going to have a ton of reserves to buy that house and then wait because you don't know how long it's going to be before you can actually find a tenant. And those tenants are going to be like messing with you. They're like, yeah, I agree to pay $1,400 a month, but I'm only going to pay $900 a month. And if you don't like it, you can evict me. Don't like it? That guy over there will let me move into his house because there's no other tenants. They're going to have all the leverage. And we just forget that, right? Like I know you know that's true, Kyle. People look at the one problem that's making things difficult and they say, if only this was different. And they don't think about, well, if you move the pieces over there, well, all the other pieces that we got used to, they go away too.
There's a psychological component to it. And when you said there's no good markets or bad markets, it made me think of Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer. He would say, there's no bad dogs, only bad owners, right? And the same is kind of true in this regard, right? There's no good markets or bad markets. It's only bad investors. And I think with what you're saying, there's definitely a psychological component to it because back in 08, everybody wants bargain prices. Everybody wants lower prices. Everybody wants a crash. But psychologically, if there was a crash, no one's going to be feeling confident to go buy anything. They're not going to be like, oh, great, the prices are finally low. When they go to put that offer on that house or start looking for a house, everybody in their family is going to say, what are you doing? You're crazy. The prices are headed down. What are you, what are you thinking? Which kind of brings me to my second question that I had for you was with this psychological kind of concept behind it. Do you think part of the reason why people click the polarizing videos, either the ones that are calling for a crash or the ones that are saying you can make easy money, do you think part of the reason is because most of us to some degree live in a delusion in our own minds where we want to believe that things are going to be easy. We want to believe that, things will just float to us. And so as a result, we're just attracted to these types of videos and click them. So that way we can just maintain our current status of living in our delusion.
Dude, that's such a good question. I've been wrestling with this the last couple of days. If you guys follow me on Threads, I've been posting the last couple of days, like some more, I don't know, I'll say negative, but they're definitely more of like a deeper thought-provoking perspective when it comes to the economy in general. Here's what I've been struggling with, Kyle. And don't forget your question because I might rabbit trail right now and then need you to bring me back. I can feel myself doing that. There's like a undercurrent in the real estate influencer space of telling you the stuff I said earlier. Take my course, learn how to do this thing, make a whole bunch of money. They have to portray real estate investing as easier and less risky than it is in order to get you to sign up for the course. Nobody goes and signs up for a course if they think that they're going to fail. They don't pay money to go learn how to lose money, but that's a real thing, right? There's also an undercurrent on the other side that says everything's going to fail, so that all the bitter, disillusioned, disenfranchised people that are pissed because houses aren't affordable, pissed because they really have worked the same job for 6 years in a row and they haven't pushed themselves in any way. They're stuck in a comfort zone and they can't get ahead because they won't get out of their comfort zone. They like to hear that, so they run to it. But what it really is there's the human condition that is looking for the easy way out. It's looking for the easy way out with everything. Okay. Have you ever been in a relationship with somebody that wanted to manipulate you to get their needs met because that was easier than incentivizing you to meet their needs? Just think about like your typical husband and wife, and the wife wants the garbage taken out, right? What works on men is if she goes and says, honey, I know you're busy and you work so hard and you're just trying to put your feet up and, have a drink and watch the game. The garbage is really bugging me. And quite frankly, I don't want to have to take it out. I know I could, I just don't want to. Could you do a huge favor for me and be my hero and take it out on the commercial? 99% of dudes, you want me to be the hero? Yes, I will go take out that. Well, what do they do instead? Because that's harder. Is they say, you know what? If you're a real man, I wouldn't have to tell you to take that garbage out. That garbage would already be taken out. Martha's husband, Tommy, he takes the garbage out every single time. I can't believe I have to even say this. I've been doing hard things all day and I can't get you to do this at all, right? And they start using the easier road, negativity, to manipulate you to get what they want. There's something in human beings that does this everywhere. We want our boss to give us a raise without having to work harder. We want to take another job somewhere else that pays more, that isn't going to require more work. We want to go get a free internship with someone to learn all the insides and outs of the trade, but we don't want to have any value to bring to them. We want to buy real estate to fix our life problems. And life doesn't work that way. And you will eventually find that out. We call it the stupid tax. If you're stupid enough to believe that, you will pay a price before you figure out that it doesn't work that way. Your boss doesn't care what your issues are. The tenants don't care what your issues are. The market doesn't care what your issues are. It's only going to work a certain way. And there's you see this everywhere. People are so excited about AI. I'm not going to have to work anymore. It's a couple years where AI is going to make your job easier, and then you're not going to have a job. It will not make life easier. You're going to have a whole bunch of people that are their quality of life came down significantly, but they're excited about AI right now. You see a whole lot of people that are they've been in the business for 2 years and they want to build a team and leverage the work and not have to do anything anymore. They want someone else to do that work. Well, guess what? That person you hire, they didn't want to come in to do your work. They wanted to work for you so that they could learn how to make someone else do the work too. Have you seen that, Kyle? It's a game of hot potato where everybody wants to pass around the responsibility and nobody wants to be the one that actually steps up and does it, right?
Yep.
There's a bad, massive, some of the people watching us right now could have tuned in to be like, oh, I'm going to learn the secret for the Airbnb market to crash, so I'm going to know when to jump in. And I'm just trying to let you guys all know, probably 70 to 80% of our country has got this virus where they're thinking that someone else is supposed to do something for them. They're the prize. Their Prince Charming is out there and needs to cater to them. That perfect girl is out there that's going to love them and do everything for them. And if you look at some of the unhealthy things that people are into, like PORN, stuff like that, it always portrays this world where you don't have to do anything and someone does it for you. All of the rom-coms people watch, the guy's doing a whole bunch of stuff and the girl's not having to do anything, right? It's a bad value system that we've got going on that works against wealth building. Now, I did forget, Kyle, that you asked me a question. Can you remember what it was?
So you're on the right track. It was along the lines of is there a psychological delusion happening in our own minds of why we're drawn to the easy method out?
Yeah, it's like this hope that if I just go on enough dates, I'll just meet Prince Charming, right? Or if I just keep on going to enough clubs, one of the girls I take home is all of a sudden going to be wife material. We all know that you don't find wife material in these environments, right? Yet people keep going. They're just hoping that they're going to strike gold. It's kind of the mentality of the 49er that moved to California to go looking for gold. They heard about someone else that did it. So they just go out there in the river, shaking that pan for 6 years, making nothing, hoping they just get lucky. It's not a good approach to take, but when we think hard work is bad, we become vulnerable to signing up for that. And I do think that's why these people watch these videos, because you just saw what we just saw. I don't understand how that person has 2 million subscribers. It didn't seem like an amazing video. But if his thumbnails get a bunch of people clicking on it and they think that they're going to hear something that's either going to save them from a disaster or make them a bunch of money the easy way, they're probably going to take it. Just everyone take it from me as someone who's been on the top of the mountain and I've been in the valley below. I've done really well. I've done really horrible. There is not a system anywhere that will allow you to make a whole bunch of money without work unless you get in early on something. Like short-term rentals had a couple years run where it was ridiculously easy money for what you had to do. Okay, like crypto, if you caught a pump right at the right time, yes, you could do really well. But people take those examples, these one-off lucky things, and then they hold it out there to get everyone else to think that they're going to have the same result. It doesn't work overall anywhere. You have to be the person who says, I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to pursue excellence. I'm willing to really chase something and be good at it. And then wealth will find you.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I think, we're just addicted to the easy way out. I think we all want the easy way because we probably don't want to have to face the fact that we could fail, or we could face the fact that we are going to have to, do some hard work, or we're going to have to actually apply ourselves and face honestly face ourselves and the parts of ourselves that maybe we don't want to see or that we try to hide. So it's just easier to kind of live in YouTube click land and keep clicking on everything. This is really good stuff. We actually have another caller lined up here. It's actually a friend of the show, a friend of Spartan League, a friend of many things. Mr. Jason Wallahan is going to come and join us. Jason is also a married man as well. So maybe you can give us some marriage advice while you're at it. I don't know.
Well, I can tell you that every wife's friend has a Tommy in their life. And but I agree, as I've said before, for somebody that has never been married, I think that David's marriage analogies are pretty spot on. Although I will say, I think that was more of a relationship dynamic than it was specific to marriage. So
yeah, and you know what? And I'll say I've been over to Tommy's house before, and it's not all that it's cracked out to be either, right? They just put on a really good show. So don't assume that the grass is always greener on the other side, because most of the time it isn't.
Yeah, agree with that.
So Jason, thanks for coming in and joining us. Jason, you own a couple short-term rentals in some different markets, and we can kind of take this direction, whatever direction we want, right? We can kind of talk about the psychology and the fact that we have to work hard to get what we want in life. Or we can talk a little bit about, the videos and what we saw. I know you weren't able to see the first video, but it was very similar to the second one along the lines of a, potential bust in the Airbnb market causing a housing crash. But Jason, for the people that maybe don't know who you are, do you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself, what you do for work and where your properties are and what you're doing there?
Yeah. So I work a W-2 job. I have for the last decade and a half, and I got into real estate a couple of years ago. I started in the long-term space, and then I found bigger pockets and discovered, the magic behind short-term rentals. And I wasn't as much drawn in by the cash flow as everybody, was at the time. It seemed nice, but I missed the wave of, 40, 60% ROI. I was okay with that though, because I have it, like I said, I have a W-2 job, and I got into it for the tax benefits. If you guys have heard David talk about the 10 ways to make money in real estate, and taxes for me were one of them. I only wanted to pay my fair share. And if there were other ways I could shelter income, then I was going to take that route. So that's why I got into short-term rentals. In addition to the tax benefits, the next benefit is that I chose vacation markets and areas that my family go. So we save money or have properties that are paid for, and we don't pay for vacations. So cash flow is not even probably number 2 on my list of reasons. We do cash flow for now on our properties. We could probably withstand a storm, but I wasn't sold on the cash flow being, the sole purpose for getting into this asset class.
I love that. So that's like a shock to the world, is that you didn't invest in real estate just for the cash flow. There was actually other wealth building reasons of why you did that. And you've had the properties for a little while now. What are your thoughts on the fact that, you know, there could potentially be an Airbnb bust, especially in the markets that you're at? Are you seeing any potential for that, or are you seeing the opposite? What are you kind of seeing from your perspective as an operator and an owner?
Yeah. So I will say this: when you guys kind of touched on this, when you delineate or you zoom in on the different segments of Airbnb, right? You have the hosts that live in their property and they rent out a room. You have those that could afford the property nonetheless. It's like a second home, vacation home to them, and they rent it out part-time when they're not there. You have those that bought in like metro markets that maybe historically were not short-term rental friendly or just options. But when people realized they could make money there, they flooded that market. And that's where you're seeing a lot of regulations. And then I invest in vacation markets where traditionally people will drive or fly to. And it's expected that these homes or these resort communities will be short-term rentals, so that said, I can withstand some ebbs and flows. When I hear talk about saturation, I struggle with that, because I think that you can saturate a market in two ways. One, you can saturate a market by increasing the supply. And I think that you see that more in metro markets for Airbnb, the Austins, Phoenix, Nashvilles, Portlands of the world that they didn't historically have a lot of short-term rentals, and now they do. And then the second piece of saturation that I see more in vacation markets is not so much more short-term rentals being on the market. A lot of times it's a one-to-one swap, right? It's like you buy a property that was already a short-term rental. You just, change the profile essentially. But the saturation that occurs there is more the competitive saturation. When I bought, for example, when I bought a cabin, right? Let's say I have a neighbor, I buy a cabin, and the neighbor had the cabin already. Both of the cabins originally were built 5 years ago, and they both sold for, let's say, $300,000. Today, I go in, I buy a cabin for $500,000. All of a sudden, I need to rent my property for more ADR, more average daily rate, than the guy next to me who's still the original owner, because my payment's higher. So I have to cash flow more. So now what do I have to do? I have to differentiate. I have to make my cabin looks different than his. I got to add arcades. I got to add murals. I got to theme it. And so what's happening where I see saturation is that there are more owners or more cabins or short-term rentals changing hands for a higher price point or a higher interest rate, creating a higher fixed payment, hopefully, but payment. And then they have to differentiate. So they do more theming and they make it more competitive. And you're getting saturation within a market, in a luxury tier, if you tiered them out.
Yeah, I think like an easy way to really lay it out is we get stuck in talking about real estate and buying properties and trading up and that kind of thing. But really, at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're buying a business, right? And you're either buying one that was underperforming or one that was performing really well. And depending on how it's performing, you're going to pay the amount regardless of where it's at, right? And so a lot of people will buy something that's underperforming and then they can figure out ways to add value to it, right? We see it even with long-term rentals, right? You can buy a property that's really messed up in really bad condition and the tenants are, have really low market rents. They're just not, very good. And so as a result, that asset is not performing well, but you as the new buyer and the new owner have to come in and figure out ways to improve it. And what you're saying is, Jason, sometimes in some of these markets, you could be buying something that was performing really, really well, but because your interest rate is higher, you now have a higher fixed expense on this property. And so now you got to figure out extra ways to make it even more enticing so that you can cash flow, or at least to not lose money on it every month.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you got it.
So is that been, like, from your perspective, has that been a challenge is there certain types of properties that you're going to target as a buyer? Are you looking for ones that are maybe underperforming, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So when I'm looking to buy still, I'm not buying into, well, no pun intended. I'm not buying into necessarily the the crash mentality. So we'll buy another property this year because I need to cost seg and bonus depreciate again. So what we're looking for is really like an underperforming asset, right? So short-term rentals, I would say, are kind of like the hybrid between a multifamily and a single family, multifamily and a long-term rental single family, in that you get more people that are willing to define value of that property based on its historic gross revenue. So, as a long-term rental, a lot of times when you buy in those markets, it's like, what did Joe Schmo pay down the street last week for a similar house? And that's how we fill in the value of this current house. And all that still happens for short-term rentals. It also is a factor. You see when investors and groups ask, like, this house is for sale. Well, how much did you generate last year? Because that's going to help me determine what I should or could pay for the house. So for me, what we're looking for are underperforming assets. And it doesn't have to be underperforming for the current owner, because it may be performing fine for them. They might have bought it when interest rates were low and prices were low, and they don't need as much, gross revenue, but it's underperforming as compared to its competitors in that area. Meaning, can I come in? Can I add some flavor to it, add some flair, get some really like Instagrammable photos, and increase the ADR to a point where it makes sense? And are they willing to, have they not realized that somebody might come in and do that work, and thus they're not considering that it could be worth a whole lot more and get a deal that way?
I love that. I want to ask you, Jason, what you think kind of about the psychological side of things. But before I do that, David, is there anything you wanted to add to this point of the topic?
No, let's keep going with Jason for now.
Okay, good. I'm loving this. So, Jason, what are your thoughts? Like, how do you personally value building wealth, or what's your perspective on building wealth? Do you find yourself drawn to easier methods, wanting the easy out way, or do you have a different perspective of how you look at it, and what's your posture in life here?
Yeah, well, that's a deep question. Thanks, Kyle. So I'm in it for the long haul. I think I might have said this, in a few YouTube lives ago that I was on, but so I have two young kids. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I didn't get into real estate until my first son was born, because I was okay with the long-term grind. I didn't grow up with a lot of money, and my goal in life was just to make sure that my kids didn't feel that financial burden as they were growing up. So I was committed to working for a long time. When I had kids, my mindset changed, not in that I didn't want to work anymore, but that I wanted to work really hard in a different way to show them that they don't have to work for their whole life. And I define work in this scenario. I define work as a 9-to-5 beholden to someone else. I think work is important. I think that the type of work that you do is optional. And that's what I'm trying to prove to my kids, is you can work hard in something that you enjoy. When you enjoy it, you can choose your work. And that's what I set out to do. So I'm in this for the long haul. So psychologically, when it comes to the market and the crash, I mean, honestly, I've thought, if the market crashes 20%, which would be huge, right? If I put 20% down on a property that breaks even cash flow, because I'm going to use it for my family to vacation, I'm going to get tax benefits, and then tomorrow the market crashes 20%. Well, okay, I mean, that stinks, but if I can hold on to the property in 30 years from now, I don't know that I'll realize that it crashed, or I'll remember, but I won't feel it financially as long as I can hold on to it. So I'm more of a weather the storm kind of guy, and just be in it for the long haul.
I like it. I think having that long-term perspective is super important. And I think, just like personally for me, I've always kind of been an underdog myself, right? If I look back at like when I was in school and academics, I pretty much skirted by and got like a 3.7 GPA in high school, but really didn't really do many assignments. I think I like looked over David's shoulder for the senior project and got like ideas from him
You
for
can
my
tell the
writing.
truth about what you did with the senior project.
Well, they might take away my degree, my
You
high
think they're
school
listening
diploma.
to this right now?
Yeah. No, like I took David's paper that he had written and I pretty much like lifted portions of it for my own, right? And then like same thing. And then I got to college and I took the entrance exams and they were like, yeah, you got to take all these special classes. So I actually had to learn how to study. I had to learn how to learn because I didn't know how to do it. Same thing with like basketball. I'm not a naturally gifted athlete. I'm not very tall. I'm not very quick. I'm not a great shooter. I had to work extremely hard. So I think from a young age, I learned I got to work at this stuff in order to get to a higher level to be able to achieve. And the cool thing about real estate and real estate investing, this is something that David taught me. I remember when David first became a real estate agent, and he started building his portfolio, but then he also started selling a ton of homes. And he came to me, and do you remember this, David, when you were like super excited and you were like, dude, I just want to learn what I just figured out. I'm like, what? And you're like, I just figured out like there's no limit to how good I can be. Like I can be the Steph Curry of real estate if I want to. Like I can't be a Steph Curry in basketball because all of my physical limitations only get me so far, but really there is no limitations. However, there's an exorbitant amount of hard work that goes into that. And then there's obviously going to be some failures along the way, some challenges, some struggles. But the answer is there's no easy way to get there either. Do you remember that, David?
Yeah, I had this because there was a frustration that I had carried. I loved basketball. It was my whole life, but there's physical limitations to what you could do. Like I could play in high school and I could play in college. I didn't play in college, but I could play with college players, but I couldn't really play with Division I college players. It just literally could not. I could give my all. They could play at 60, 70%, and it was a struggle to just be able to keep up. Yeah, it's very hard. And the thought of in the NBA, that's impossible. It's too fast and they're too strong. And it pissed me off that it didn't matter how hard I worked or how dedicated I was or how smart I got. I could not overcome a physical limitation. And then I got into real estate sales and I was like, man, your athletic ability is just your brain. Your mindset is your athletic ability. Nothing stops you. If you choose to think a certain way, there isn't anyone that can stop you from selling more homes. I just have to learn how to be the kind of person that people want to sell their house. And I have complete control over it if I'm willing to make those changes. Like, can you imagine a world where if you chose, you could get taller? You could work on getting taller, right? And you could work on like, you could just jump really high if you just practice jumping all the time where there were not physical limitations. That's what I realized when I became an entrepreneur.
I love that. Yeah, I never thought about that. Like if you could work at getting taller, that'd be kind of cool. You can work at getting stronger, but you can't really work at getting taller. That'd be a nice little perk.
I wish it did work that way because all these guys out there that are getting passed up on dating apps because they're only 5'7" or whatever, they have like no chance. Like the how tall a guy was, which every girl loves, would be an actual indication of how hard you worked, which would be a better thing, right? Like you had to earn your tallness. I mean, that's like capitalism within dating. That would be so much better than just the genes.
Yeah. So there's this definitely like this part of being an entrepreneur, being in real estate, or just really just trying to fulfill your life's dreams or leave a legacy for your family, whatever it is, like there really is nothing stopping you. And if you find yourself clicking through and watching videos that promise an easy way, like David said, unless you're like David said, unless you're at the very beginning and that's a promising thing, the chance of you catching lightning in a bottle is going to be very, very slim. But if you pick up your pickaxe and you start working and you start building the skills that you need and you start looking at the parts of your personality or the parts of yourself that need to change, you're going to have much more opportunity ahead of you. I think that's the biggest thing, honestly, is there, we just don't want to change things about ourselves. We'd rather just be stuck. And I'm finding the older I get, the harder it is for me to want to change that. I think in my like early 20s, I just had a big chip on my shoulder. So I never like wanted to change. And then as I get older, I just get too tired to want to change. I find myself having to like force change on purpose and like get myself out of my comfort zone on a regular basis because it's just too comfortable right now. It's way too comfortable.
Jason, go ahead.
Well, I think one point I want to make on that is, so in our house, what we ask, my wife and I ask each other when it comes to tougher questions or it could be small things, big things, but do we like that, or do we like the idea of that? And you have to be honest with yourself. And this is, I mean, I'll steal David's analogy because he uses it a lot with the abs, right? Like, all of us probably like the idea of having abs, right? That would be something that falls in the idea for me.
Yeah.
But I don't really like abs, or I don't like having abs because I don't have them. If I did, I would do something about it. I just like the idea of them. And it could be that way in so many areas, where you're willing or unwilling to put the work in. If you're not willing to put the work in, the chances are you probably just like the idea of that thing, as opposed to actually liking or wanting that thing.
So what do you see, Jason, with some of the other short-term rental operators that you're talking to? Do you see people hurting? Are you seeing, like, my guess would be the people that bought 2018, 2019, 2020, they got in at 3-4% interest rates. Their mortgages are significantly less. So though while their revenue is down, they're not necessarily losing money. But the people that probably bought in 2022, 2023, their rates are like double. It's significantly higher. And they've got less time with their property on the market to generate reviews and kind of like win with the algorithm. Is that what you're seeing? Is the newer people are getting hammered, or is it something different?
Yeah, I'm in a lot of Facebook groups or other, avenues where there's a lot of investors talking, and that's exactly it. So if you've had your property for a few years, it's established and you're doing all right, and chances are you might even have a few, so you can kind of weather the storm a little bit easier because a property might help pay for another one, and you'll be okay. But for the newer ones, I think that those that kind of caught the wave late, they bought into the course, in 2021, that somebody was selling and said, hey, I make $5,000 a month with one property. Let me show you how to do it. I think that some of those investors, I'm not going to blanket, put them all blanket statement for all of them, but I think that some of them, what I've seen is that they didn't intend to get into the hospitality space. They thought this would be a little bit easier. They thought it would be way more passive than it is. And they didn't realize that the work that they were going to have to put in. And now they don't have, because of when they bought, they don't have the margins to pay somebody else to do it for them. So they're stuck in a business that isn't necessarily the most time consuming, but it takes an hour or two a week, and they don't like it and they're not good at it. And therefore there's this snowball effect of, they don't get good reviews. They don't get a lot of reviews.
Oh, man, this is good.
So then they just keep going down this road of, not even a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it's like they fell into the trap, and they can't dig themselves out of the hole.
Yeah, that well, my favorite thing about what you said that I want everyone to hear, you shouldn't do it if you don't like doing it. Okay. Yeah. We've been sold real estate investing is passive income, which means you don't have to like it. You don't have to be good at it. You just make the money, you buy the thing, you let someone else take care of it. And I probably would say traditional real estate investing is more or less like that. Like, you don't have to be good at analysis. You don't have to be a great negotiator. You don't have to be super ambitious. Just buy a damn triplex, let a property manager manage it. It's going to make you some money. And when you get tired of it, sell it and do something else with your money, right? But it isn't like that now. You're jumping into a battle where you have to be good at being a short-term rental operator. You have to love researching the information. You have to look at it and say, what are they doing? How did they do it? How could I do it? You have to enjoy giving good service. So Jason, for you, winning with the client would be making sure they leave a good review, seeing if you can get them to visit again, seeing if you get them to tell their friends about it. For Kyle, that would be getting a client to give him referrals, getting someone to say, hey, I want to sell my house as opposed to just buying, right? For me, that would be getting people to come and do business with the David Green team or the One Brokerage, or maybe stay in one of my rentals or visit a retreat or join Spartan League. But you have to be passionate about being good at what you're doing. If you're not, you're guaranteed to lose right now. Okay. Like, one of the things I say all the time, one of the worst situations to ever find yourself in life is to be in a physical fight when you don't want to be fighting. It's horrible. Like, having to punch someone and get punched by someone when you don't want to be there if you ever see videos of what that looks like when some guy's just turning around and letting someone hit him, or he's like curled up in the ground getting kicked. Oh, I can't stand it. You have to want to fight. Otherwise, don't get in the fight. Don't talk mess. Don't put yourself in that position. Don't get into business. Do not buy a short-term rental. Do not start down this real estate journey if you don't love it, because you're going to lose to the guy that does. It's going to outwork and outperform. Priscilla, one of our retreat attendees, said something earlier that she works her butt off, but she loves it because it fills her soul. So she's not going to run out of energy. She's going to be outperforming and she's going to beat people in a competition. Jason loves what he does. He's going to be researching all the time to figure out how to be good at it. Kyle is really, really, really good at being an agent. If we had more houses to sell, it'd be a whole lot easier for him. He's limited by inventory. He's not limited. It's like a basketball player that can't find a game to play in. He's super good, but like no one's playing, so it can't benefit him. Everyone needs to hear that. Don't do it because there's a lot of money in it. Do it because you're going to like it, and then that will lead to a lot of money for you.
Yeah, if you chase something that you're not passionate, not even I wouldn't even say passionate about. If you chase something that you don't even really like that much, then you're going to get burnt out. Yeah, just don't do it.
You're going to give a bad effort. It's going to reflect in the reviews. It's going to reflect in the numbers. Like, you have to be passionate. And that's kind of what we're here to talk about. It's what no one wants to hear. But just tell me what the asset class is that I can buy that's going to be easy. Tell me where the best opportunity is. Well, I mean, maybe the NBA is where the biggest contracts are, but what if you hate basketball and you really like riding a horse? Like, it's not going to be as much money, but you're going to be more successful as a horse jockey than you're going to be trying to play basketball when you hate it or you're not the right physical size for it. There has to be an area of passion here. So if you guys want to come to the retreat we're going to be doing in Fort Lauderdale, we will be discussing those very things. Who are you? What are you like? What is your passion? What opportunities are out there for you within real estate? But remember that as you're clicking through videos, there is no super secret sauce. There's no thumbnail or clickbait that's actually going to open your mind, and there's some portal you didn't know about. You can make a bunch of money. There's stuff you like. There's stuff you don't like. And knowing yourself is pretty important.
Let me ask you this, David, and then I kind of want to ask Jason about the retreat coming up, but maybe you can give a little peek behind the curtain, because I'm sure there are some people watching this right now, people who have listened to the podcast, they've come to these YouTube lives, and they're like, yeah, I want to get into real estate. I think I'm passionate about it. I don't know if I'm passionate about it yet. Or maybe they just don't know what they're passionate about. Maybe consciously they don't know what it is. What would you say to somebody in terms of them trying to figure out what they're passionate about?
What would you say, Jason?
I mean, I'd say if you're trying to figure out what you're passionate about, think about what you do with if there was no money involved. I mean, like whether you don't need money, you wouldn't get paid money. Take money out. You have to do that. And then what would you do anyway for fun, for volunteering, to give back? And then what can you? And then so once you define that or figure that out, then you can say, well, can I provide enough value in that space some way that somebody else is maybe not doing, or I can do it better to do something that I'm passionate about while generating some revenue.
I think you can ask what feels light, what feels heavy. So sometimes I can tell what someone else is passionate about just by paying attention to what gets them excited when they talk and what they're like eager to jump in and show you. Okay. So Jason is passionate about anything that involves a spreadsheet. He's going to get really excited about that, right? Which is not a bad thing. Like, you need to have certain jobs. You need to have an analytical mind that is really excited to dig in and find like where the gold nugget is. But if you're not that, if you're the people person and you're out there trying to analyze a bunch of deals, you're going to hate it. You're not going to do it. The other people are people persons. You see what they're like. You bring up a spreadsheet and their eyes glaze over. But you start to talk to them about what they had for lunch and, they just like come alive, right? Like, it's kind of weird when you see that happen. But those are people that are passionate about that. The other thing you can do is you can ask the people in your life that know you very well, what do you think are my strengths and what are my weaknesses? So let's do that. Like, Kyle, let's wrap up with you playing that with me. Let's start off with, as my best friend, what are my weaknesses that, especially within business, that you're like, oh God, if David has to do that, we're in trouble?
I would say giving David like details that he has to remember. So giving you like, hey, remember, we got to pick up the rental car at 10 a.m. on Tuesday. I know that you are not going to remember that kind of stuff.
I won't even know it's Tuesday. I don't know what days of I only know this is Friday because we do YouTube lives on Friday.
and that is it, right? Yeah, unless it's built into your schedule, we can assume that you're going to drop that ball. Same thing of just giving you any small task and assuming you're going to remember that too. So if I say, hey, can you look up this Google thing for me tomorrow when you wake up? That'd be great.
So good point.
That's just going to slip right through the
0%, 1% chance I will remember that. Like if I don't do it right then and there, I will not do it. I will forget.
Yes.
In fact, I wonder how guys like you, when I'm like, hey, can you do this thing tomorrow? You're like mental thing, like you stick it in your brain, it pops up in the mornings. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, there's like a special organized area where it just gets stored away, and then it's boom.
I can remind you, right? Okay, good. So what are the things that you do see that I'm either passionate about or I'm good at, or they're easy for me?
Talking about real estate obviously is a big one. Leading people, inspiring people, analogies, obviously, and helping really break down concepts for people to understand things that can be complex and making them more palatable for the average individual. And I would say also having your hands in a lot of different businesses as well.
So based on that, if you were my coach, you would probably steer me in certain directions and put me in certain positions to succeed, and then make sure I'm not involved in other things, right?
100%. I would say, hey, David, you need to stop wasting your time like Windexing the windows in the office. You're better on the phone or talking to people or talking on the microphone and getting people interested in the companies. Your time is not best used cleaning the bathroom.
Jason, what are you thinking?
I'm just thinking that like it's good to have people in your life that are willing to be like the that Kyle to the David in this conversation, right? Like that's necessary. I have people in my life that like my mom, for example. I mean, she's probably not even the best example for a lot of people, but like I think about if I said to my mom, hey, I'm going to sell everything and we're going to move to Alaska and we're going to just sell ice on the side of the road. She'd be like, that's a fantastic idea. Like, I want you to chase your dreams, right? Like you will do great. And it's like, no, Mom, that's a terrible idea. Mm-hmm. But so you have to know, like when you guys talk about that dynamic, right? When David says to Kyle, tell me what like my strengths are, what my weaknesses are. You want somebody that's going to be honest and transparent with you.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because if it's somebody who's just, fluffing your pillow and making you feel good about yourself, that's never going to expose the things about you that you either need to work on or give to somebody else. And so, yeah, that brutal honesty is 100% important. Jason, just out of curiosity for you, like what things are you like, just besides spreadsheets, as David said, like what things like really excite you, where you get up the next morning, you get out of bed and you're like, man, I can't wait. There's a whole nother day so I can accomplish X.
Yeah, well, I would say that like I have parallel tracks in my life of things I want to accomplish, and there's professional items for just growing, learning more about real estate and business, and sure, some of that comes with crunching spreadsheets. I would say it's more like analysis, and it just happens to be a spreadsheet as a tool for that. But
yeah,
but that is an area I'm passionate about. But I try to also, like, I'm a dad and I'm a husband first, so like that is an area that I'm also very passionate about. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to parent. I'd say that some days I'm a better dad than I am a parent, and I'm always looking to improve in that area. So that's a passion for me too. And then inside of that, like there are some things that I want to instill, character that I want to instill in my kids that I can derive from business, which is hard work, and then where it meets my purpose, which is like just helping others. There's a lot of ways we do that. We volunteer, we plan community events, and it's always nice just helping others. And so that's where those two things intersect for me, because the funds from the one side and the character I want to build on the other, and that's kind of how we do it.
That's cool. They can really work together. And yeah, to answer my own question that I heard from earlier, which was how do you find your passion? I think one of the ways that you mentioned was like, what do you consume in your everyday life? What books are you reading? What videos are you watching? What things are you learning about? Because there's a pretty good chance that if you're consuming all things about parenting, that like parenting is really important to you, right? So that maybe that's something you focus on, or maybe it's business or real estate or whatever. But if you find yourself just consuming something a ton, there's a good chance you have a passion about that. For me and David, that's all we did was like watch basketball videos. We'd watch the And One videos. We'd watch the Pistol Pete homework basketball videos. We would watch anything we could around basketball because that was like our passion at that time in life. So a lot of times what you consume is also what your passion is.
Yeah.
So that being said, I'm going to put this up here for anybody that's interested. We have a retreat coming up. Man, we're 3 weeks away from today. So this is really cool. This is right around the corner. And I know you're going to be one of the individuals attending the retreat, Jason, but for somebody that's coming to the retreat, could you maybe give us 1 or 2 things that you're looking forward to and that you hope to get out of the retreat?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm excited about is being around, 20 other people that felt as committed to coming as I did, right? It's a commitment. I mean, not just financially, but like it's a commitment to leave my kids for 5 days. Although I will say that Kyle blew up my spot on the mastermind the other night, and my wife heard him say that the reason I'm going is to get a break from my kids, which is probably partially true, but she didn't need to know that.
Sorry. My bad.
It's all right. But that's not the sole reason I'm going. So, to be around other people that are as committed as I am, and just meeting people that are like on fire for something, right? It doesn't have to be real estate. It could be, maybe that's an avenue or, kind of one of the things that they're working on, but just, I want to meet passionate people because that is what I want to be about, the things that are important to me. So that's number one. And then, and then I think aside from that, just building like a sense of camaraderie and team and getting to know like individuals, you guys, but also, the attendees more like on a one-on-one basis, and, making some friendships where we can encourage each other and help hold each other accountable, like for the long term. I'm not looking for this to be like a one and done type of thing.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think that is something that I'm absolutely looking forward to as well. David, did you have something you wanted to add? You look like you're going to say something.
No, I'm just going to thank everybody for being here tonight. Thank Jason and Elon for coming on and talking, and thank everybody for giving us their time on Friday. Remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. My understanding is that when we go live, you get a notification on your phone to remind you. Has anybody not getting those? Is everybody getting those? Let me know in the comments if that's working. And Kyle, how would they set the notification to tell them if they're not getting it?
There should be a notification bell under the video that you're watching right now. And if it has a little slash through it, that means you're not receiving notifications. If you turn it on and make sure the slash is not through it, a lot of times you'll get the notification on your phone. You'll also get a notification to your email address to which your YouTube account is tied. So make sure that that notification bell is turned on so that you can get notified when these babies go live.
All right. Thank you, guys. We'll let everybody get out of here. Enjoy your Friday night. Let us know what type of content you'd like us to make, and we will do more. So you can either reach out to Kyle. He's Kyle Ranke on Instagram. I'm guessing, Kyle, that's the best way, or do you like Facebook more?
Instagram's the best. Yeah, that's the quickest.
All right. So send him a message and let him know what you'd like us to make content on, or who you'd like us to have as a guest, and we'll see if we can bring him in.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night and a good weekend. See ya.